Picture this. It's 2011, and after having spent thousands of hours playing Rhythm Heaven on your trusty DS, you go to the store and pick up the next evolution of Nintendo's hardware, the 3DS. With its slick blue exterior and state-of-the-art three-dimensional visuals, games can now be played in ways never thought possible, with the fighting game genre being no stranger to this phenomenon. In their infinite wisdom, Capcom decides to release Super Street Fighter 4 as a launch title, satiating the FGC's demands for brand new portable fighters, but it's not all perfect. Combining hotly anticipated hardware with the biggest 2D fighting game at the time should have been a slam dunk, but rampant criticism concerning Nintendo's business decisions from the gaming press resulted in sluggish sales for the handheld. For this reason, not many developers longed to release fighting games on the 3DS, and if you weren't a fan of these three series, you were kind of out of luck. At this point, it must have seemed like all hope was lost, but if you were one of the lucky few who remember Nintendo's presence at E3 2011, the concept of Bandai Namco's Tekken series arriving on the system would have been intoxicating. No doubt as a result of series director Katsuhiro Harada using his colossal power levels to partner with Nintendo, Tekken's friendship with the Big N's handhelds was returning. As 2001's Tekken Advance on the GBA was critically acclaimed, it made sense to collaborate again. So with both parties once again on board, a legendary fighting game was set to be released that would blow the competition away. Okay, dramatic intros aside, I genuinely forgot that Tekken 3D Prime Edition existed, and as I'm a big fan of Tekken Tag Tournament 2 on the Wii U, another Nintendo exclusive Tekken entry sounds right up my alley. It's been years since I played it, and because my memory is that of a piece of plywood, I'll technically be going in fresh. With the preamble out of the way, let's explore all there is to know about Tekken 3D Prime Edition. Upon remembering that this game was real and not something I hallucinated during a fever dream, I instantly wanted to know the answer to the burning question: why was Tekken 3D made in the first place? At this point, I put on my detective cap, scouring the internet for answers, and after days of restless research, I stumbled across two useful interviews. One with former Nintendo president Satoru Iwata and another on the Eureka website. For those not in the know, Eureka is the studio behind the classic Street Fighter EX series, and they co-developed Tekken 3D with Bandai Namco. When asked why Tekken made its way over to the 3DS, there are two reasons that Harada provides. The first is that he was curious to see how Tekken would perform when in the hands of a brand new customer base, and the second involves everyone's favorite pastime: esports. The story involves Harada watching MLG's former Tekken and Super Smash Bros. Tournaments, noticing a divide between the groups. The Tekken players were described as being big, brawny, and considerably older than the Smash crowd, who were made up of men, women, and even children. Despite their differences, Harada reasoned that both groups were experiencing the same rush from playing wildly different games. Harada also revealed that despite Tekken 5 Dark Resurrection and Tekken 6 releasing on the PSP, the user base between these games and their original console versions were almost identical. Appealing to a new clientele was the driving force behind Tekken 3D's creation, but it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. Before development had even started in the early 2010s, not many companies had access to the 3DS's specs, including Bandai Namco, so when the thought of a brand new portable Tekken popped into Harada's head, he used his industry contacts to get in touch with one studio that he knew had the specs: Eureka. Eureka president Ichiro Mihara then informed Harada that if the Tekken team programmed everything correctly, then a 3D fighter at 60 FPS could absolutely run on the 3DS, and he even made a little demo to prove it. After this, the two companies joined forces, marking the first time Namco had ever partially outsourced Tekken development to an external studio. Their initial plan was to create a small-scale title with no more than 20 or so playable characters, a far cry from Tekken 6's full roster on the PSP. Eventually, Namco changed their mind, and they let Eureka know that they wanted all the fighters in, no matter how much work it would require. This is very admirable, but it unfortunately resulted in some new features being cut. The first of which was a mode called Iron Tower, where the player would have to attack Heihachi's tower. Further details aren't provided, but it sounds unique, and I wonder what it would have played like. The second mode was called Untold Story No. 2, and it made great use of the 3DS's cameras. Players would take pictures of someone's face, put them on their favorite fighter's character model, and then do battle with Kazuya and Heihachi, who looked like Iwata and Harada respectively. In addition to doubling the character roster, Tekken 3D also includes Blood Vengeance, and this is a whole other can of worms. Blood Vengeance is a CG animated feature-length film that focuses on Xiaoyu and Elisa, with the gimmick being that audiences can now watch it in 3D. The Eureka interview goes into full detail surrounding the film, but the short of it involves Harada wanting to make the movie widely accessible. Not everyone has a 3D monitor after all, with them not even being publicly available in Japan at the time, so incorporating Blood Vengeance into Tekken 3D was a no-brainer. To pull it off, both Bandai Namco and Eureka had to develop a custom video player with full subtitle support for the 3DS, as well as finding the balance between video compression and quality. There's only so much data that can be held on a 3DS cartridge after all, with this process taking around a month and a half. The dynamic duo ran into significant problems during their attempt to make it all work, however, with their initial naivety being one of their roadblocks. Harada also explained that the film's inclusion in Tekken 3D would elevate the title from being a simple fighting game, as well as serving a gateway to get people to watch it. I'll cover this in more detail later, but one of the new gameplay features is how the 3DS's touchscreen can be used to input attacks. This idea was the result of developer brainstorms regarding distinct gameplay features, with Ichiro Mihara claiming that he thought of the idea at midnight. Countless hours of trial and error went into making this feature feel as natural as possible, as well as providing inexperienced players instant access to their favorite moves. Harada even mentions that he wanted this feature, or at least something similar, to appear in the mainline Tekken games, which turned out to be true, as both Tekken 7 and 8 feature move shortcut options. After all of this was decided on, it came time to name the game, with the word Prime being chosen for its powerful sound. Game director Kohei Ikeda explains that the name indicates that the title was top quality, reflecting just how much work both Namco and Eureka had poured into it. By now, it's obvious that both Heaven and Earth had to be moved in order for this game to run properly, so let's analyze how the high execution gameplay of Tekken translates onto the 3DS. As Tekken has always been a 4-button fighter with limited motion inputs, the 3DS's 4 face buttons and 2 triggers work surprisingly well here, but okay, we're getting ahead of ourselves. For now, let's discuss how the 3DS's unique features tie into Tekken 3D's battle system. Much like with Super Street Fighter 4, 4 touch panels are found on the bottom screen, and if you activate them, you get some unique attacks. The first is a launcher, second is a bound, third is a combo ender, and the fourth is a throw. Chaining the first 3 together is a universal combo method which can help you understand how new characters function, as well as providing easy access to attacks that may be tricky to perform manually. It's possible to change what attacks are found here, sure, but the choices given are quite limited, so I just stuck with the defaults. I feel that the panels are a good way of getting new players familiar with Tekken's battle mechanics without making them too strong. If they repeatedly spam launches or the same throw, there's nothing stopping an experienced opponent from defending accordingly, so you still have to know how to play Tekken in order to win. Unfortunately, the panels are the only unique gameplay feature that Tekken 3D has to offer, as everything else is pure Tekken 6. The flow of matches and types of combos you'll be dishing out here have been straight up lifted from that game, and I'm perfectly fine with this. After all, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. This means that your general battle strategies will carry over into Tekken 3D, rewarding players who are already familiar with the series' mechanics. If you didn't own a PSP but you still wanted to practice Tekken on the go, this title will do nicely, as long as you can get used to the feel of the 3DS. Yeah, it's about time we talk about how Tekken, a series that demands precise execution, functions on a handheld. The footage you've seen so far is what I've recorded on an emulator, but after playing Tekken 3D on actual hardware, it doesn't feel too bad? Attacks are nice and responsive, but I just couldn't get comfortable with the movement options. I found that the 3DS's circle pad is too slippery for reliable lateral movement, and although the D-pad works much better here, it makes it more challenging to combine movement with strikes. Having my left thumb be lower than my right feels awkward, and it just wasn't very enjoyable for long periods of time. I understand that this is purely subjective and different people will have different experiences, but playing it on my 3DS with my big hands made me long for the emulator. Jokes aside, this is most definitely the best control scheme the developers could have incorporated, so even with my gripes, I'm glad that they didn't jump the shark and try to do something too crazy. Moving over to the fighters now, every combatant in Tekken 6, including Tag 2's young Heihachi, makes an appearance in Tekken 3D. This blows my mind, as I can't imagine it would have been easy to cram them all into a game under 2 GB in size. In my view, the roster is arguably the greatest quality of the title, as I love how distinctive all the characters are. There's a plethora of fighting styles represented here, and it's always fun to mess around with them in training mode. Despite the lowered resolution and less detailed character models, everything looks and sounds amazing. It's super authentic to the mainline Tekken entries, and it brilliantly displays the types of visuals that the base 3DS was capable of. Whether you're playing some mid-range neutral or you're inputting a devastating war combo, there's a very visceral sense of impact that makes Tekken 3D's combat system satisfying as heck. Now, I know I keep mentioning Tekken 6 over and over, but much to my surprise, there are actually 8 new stages to be found in Tekken 3D. They all take inspiration from a variety of sources, with my favourite of the bunch being the Ruined Dojo. As they don't provide any gameplay situations that have never been seen before in this series, these stages aren't too special in terms of practicality, but I love their aesthetic appeal. Every single one of them has something unique going on in the background, and their lighting helps them to stand apart. Aside from all this, there's honestly not much more for me to say, as there are no fundamental gameplay differences introduced in Tekken 3D. Again, it's more or less a portable version of Tekken 6, but with optional touchscreen controls, so I'm sorry to disappoint if you thought I was hiding something special. This somewhat plays to the 3DS's strengths as a portable system, as I can't imagine ever playing Tekken 3D for extended periods of time. It's the type of game that you play for 5 to maybe 10 or 15 minutes before taking a break, but if you're a fan of single-player content in fighting games, what does Tekken 3D have to offer? With the 3DS's brand new features comes opportunities for fighting games to feature fresh types of content, but does Tekken 3D succeed in this avenue? For starters, we have Special Survival. Initially, I was quite intrigued by this, but I feel that its name is more exciting than the mode itself. Special Survival comes in the form of survival ladders, where your health bar carries over between rounds, with the number of enemies thrown at you increasing with each ladder. Finishing the 5-man ladder unlocks the 10-man ladder, and so on, but as far as gameplay is concerned, Special Survival acts like your average fighting game survival mode. You beat enemies and try not to lose, rinse and repeat until you get bored. In an attempt to spice things up a bit, Bandai Namco decided to give players Tekken cards as a reward for clearing these stages. These are virtual trading cards that detail specific characters and locations within the Tekken universe, and they serve as the primary gameplay hook of Tekken 3D. The more you play, the more cards you unlock, with Street Pass being another option for earning. By the way, remember Street Pass? That awesome feature where you could walk around in real life and connect with other people's devices to earn digital goods in games? Yeah, I remember it too. Anyway, going back to Special Survival, its replay value hinges on your enjoyment of survival modes. If you're like me and you think that survival is fun to kill some time with every now and then you probably won't end up hooked on the mode. In my time with Special Survival, I found it to be somewhat numbing, as everything kind of blurs together after a while. As far as I can tell, enemies and stages aren't randomly generated, and there are only so many times you can fight the CPU in a row before it becomes tedious. Plus, I never felt that the enemies were offering a real challenge either. They just kind of stand there and leave themselves open to big launches, so you never have to strategically think about how to approach a battle. My original plan was to go through all of the courses, but when I saw that there was a 40 opponent course, I reached my limit. There's no way I'm gonna spend my time completing this, I'm sorry. Other than Special Survival, we have both online and offline multiplayer, quick battles against the CPU, and a training mode. Being able to view my horrifically malformed Tekken 1 Kazuya card was funny for around 15 seconds, but then I realized that there's nothing to do in this game. If you don't have anyone else to play with, then Special Survival and Quick Battle are your only options. There's not even an arcade mode with basic intro and outro sequences, so if you were expecting any sort of lore, you'll be disappointed. To be honest, I felt pretty dumbstruck when I realized that this was literally all Tekken 3D had to offer in terms of gameplay. There's nothing else, what you see is what you get. Crammed into the cartridge is the aforementioned Blood Vengeance movie, but I can't imagine that watching it on the tiny 3DS screen will lead to the best viewing experience. I would love to sit down and watch the whole thing, but I simply don't have the time in my schedule, and even if I did, finding the movie in its original aspect ratio in HD would be my top priority. On a technical level, I'm highly impressed by all the video and audio compression going on to make it playable on a handheld device while still looking good. That couldn't have been easy, but if I'm spending time with a video game system, then I'd want to actually, play a game? Blood Vengeance on 3DS is a fun part of obscure Tekken history, but I can't imagine it sold many copies of Tekken 3D. Look, to be honest, I don't think I've ever had this much trouble covering a game's content before, as there's usually something interesting for me to discuss. Super Street Fighter 4 3D Edition had the over-the-shoulder camera mode and figurine lottery, as well as all of the home console version's offerings. Dead or Alive Dimensions contains a story mode, tag battle, arcade, survival, Street Pass functionality, and a figurine mode. BlazBlue Continuum Shift 2 contains all of this stuff as well as Legion and Abyss mode. There's no online play, sure, but I still think it mauls Tekken 3D in terms of its overall offerings. Because of the lacking content, I genuinely don't understand who this game was made for. There's no chance in hell that the die-hard crowd would ever take this seriously, and the casual crowd will just end up getting bored and moving on after a few days. If there was a mode that took advantage of the 3DS's cameras, gyroscope, microphone, etc., then we could have had something really special on our hands, but this unfortunately wasn't the case. Even I found it hard to record footage for the video, as my brain was telling me to quit and go do something fun instead. I really hope you love fictional trading cards, dear viewer, as they're the only form of long-term content that the game will ever offer you. If everything went to plan and Tekken 3D was a smash hit, then we would be living in a better timeline, one where world peace was achieved. Unfortunately, this wasn't exactly the case, with a very mixed critical reception being thrown the game's way. In the interest of not being a doomer, I'll start by listing what was praised. Tekken 3D's character roster is massive, and much like with Tekken 6's PSP port, every fighter from the home console version appears here. It's quite easy to find review outlets all over the world commending this aspect of the title, and I definitely agree. Not to repeat what you've already heard, but it is a real technological achievement to fit all of these fighters and their animations, sounds, hit effects, etc. into an extremely small file size. The graphics are also quite nice too. What you've seen so far is the result of me messing around with emulator settings to upscale the game, but if you return everything to normal, it still doesn't look too bad. Tekken 3D was obviously designed to be viewed on the small screens of the launch model 3DS, not a large computer monitor, so it makes sense for fine graphical details to be thrown away in the interest of optimization. Finally, the performance is rock solid, as I didn't encounter any frame rate drops even on the more intensive stages. I don't know what kind of Aztec wizardry Bandai Namco used to make the game run this well on the 3DS, but it's nothing short of amazing. Conversely, the elephant, or grizzly bear in the room, in Kuma's case, is the lack of content. I explained my perspective on this before, and it more or less mirrors what the gaming press reported back in 2012. There really isn't much to do here, so after the initial thrill of playing Tekken on the 3DS wears off, I can't imagine why you would ever return, and the reviewers agreed with me. Much of Tekken's appeal to those outside of the competitive crowd comes from its interesting characters and the ways in which they interact with one another. Friendships, rivalries, and even life lessons were displayed to audiences in previous installments, and as Tekken 3DS is more or less a handheld version of Tekken 6, I don't understand why they couldn't include that game's character intro and outro sequences. I mean, they're not amazing in Tekken 6, but something would have been better than nothing. In addition to all this, the online netcode was also a target of criticism, although this is slightly challenging to research as there aren't many resources available for me to consult. What I did find, however, was a review from techgaming.com stating that Tekken 3D has no online connection quality indicator. If you're even a little bit familiar with playing fighters online, then you'll understand that its exclusion is absurd. Being able to gauge potential connections before initiating a battle is like online fighting games 101, so this must have just been a developer oversight. A member of the old Shoryuken forum stated that the online was atrocious and that Tekken's competitors were far better in this regard. There are supposedly no lobbies either, so I'd guess you'd have to randomly match with your friends for casual battles. What I find hilarious though is that the touch panels are fully accessible online. Who needs to grind out execution when you can score big damage for minimal effort? Before we wrap up, I'll also add that Tekken 3D sales figures are somewhat of a mystery, as there are no easily accessible websites that contain this information. I even went through Bandai Namco's 2012 and 2013 annual financial reports, but there's no mention of Tekken at all in here. From what we know now, my educated guess would be that Tekken 3D sold okay. I can easily see this title breaking even with its budget, although the missed opportunity to capitalize on the 3DS's 2011 launch period as well as the mediocre word of mouth surrounding it couldn't have helped things. There's a reason why Bandai Namco never acknowledges this game after all, and even though I don't think it's bad, I'm not gonna say it's amazing either. As an oddball experiment of sorts, Tekken 3D Prime Edition is still quite the fascinating game, as even though it's been over a decade since its launch, I still can't believe it's real. A downscaled Tekken 6 port combined with a feature-length movie released exclusively on a handheld system from 2011 sounds too bizarre to be true, but by using the power of Harada's vision, it does exist. Jokes aside, I really wish that there were more significant things to be said about this title. It's one of those games that just kind of came and went, and I don't hear anyone talk about it anymore. If you were into Tekken in the 2010s, then you most likely had a PSP with either Dark Resurrection or Tekken 6, but if you really wanted to watch Blood Vengeance, then you could have just gotten Tekken Hybrid on PS3. Hell, the movie was in 3D there as well. In the modern day, it's also quite simple to emulate the older titles on Android smartphones, so outside of YouTube video-induced morbid curiosity, I can't think of a reason to ever revisit Tekken 3D. It just doesn't have enough going on to capture anyone's attention in the long run, as even the most diehard of Tekken supporters will get bored eventually. The game is also somewhat of a rarity, and it's not hard to find it being sold for absurd prices on eBay. Sorry, but I could buy groceries for the week with that money. All in all, I'd suggest giving it a shot if you're interested, but I'd be lying if I said it'll become one of your new favorite portable fighters. If you made it all the way to the end, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you and your time, and I hope you had fun. I was very sick when I started making this video, and my health hasn't been too good this year, so I hope you enjoyed it. Take care, and I'll see you in the next one.